It's funny how facts we thought we knew for sure for long periods of time suddenly become debunked. Then suddenly everyone is to blame, and how can such an atrocity have occurred? And in the end, someone is burned at the stake. But at least we can all sit back and laugh at such matters in the future when the whole ordeal is long gone. Possibly one of the most recent of said debunking revolves around the planet Pluto. Okay, I can already hear you Pluto purists, or pluralists if you like, screaming at your desktop because you know damn well that the frozen chunk of rock out there aimlessly floating around in the Kuiper Belt is in fact a planet. Always has been, always will be. But the sad truth is, it's not. Some of you who are less stubborn may be wondering, well, why did such a poor fate befall the poor thing? As it turns out, that's what we're going to look at on this episode of Stuff You've Probably Wondered with Captain McMuffin. Let's back up for a moment as we examine Pluto for what it really is, or was, rather. The famed pseudo-planet was discovered back in 1930 by a man named Clyde W. Tombaugh. Years before, it was determined that, due to the orbits of Uranus and Neptune, that there had to be some sort of ninth planet existing out there. And yet Tombaugh searched the night sky at the Lowell Observatory in Arizona for almost a year to find this alleged Planet X. And though there wasn't supposed to be something out there from a mathematics standpoint, Tombaugh discovered the evasive little planet anyway. The name Pluto was actually thought of by an 11-year-old girl in Oxford, England. She had told her grandfather the idea of calling the ninth planet as such because Pluto is the name of the Roman god of the underworld, and the planet itself is far, far from the sun, bathed in almost an eternal darkness. This information was passed to the Lowell Observatory, and sure enough, Pluto was officially named. Pluto is the pipsqueak of the solar system, as it is smaller than many of the moons orbiting the other planets. Saturn's Titan, the 4 Galilean moons of Jupiter, even our own moon is considered a big brute to Pluto. Another thing people fail to realize is Pluto's orbit. While it's true that other planets in the solar system orbit the sun in an elliptical pattern, these are very nearly perfect circles. Pluto, on the other hand, well, it's not circular to say the least. In fact, this is such an awkward orbit that from 1979 to 1999, Pluto was the 8th planet of the solar system. Take that, stingy science teachers. So this was the real start of the astronomers' questioning of the status of the poor little sphere of ice and rock. The real planetary smackdown occurred in 2005 when a sudden 10th planet was found beyond Pluto. This little devil of the solar system's city limits was Eris, with its nomenclature paying homage to Eris, the Greek god of discord and chaos. The name referred to the incoming chaos that would ensue as astronomers struggled to decide what constituted as a planet. Why? Eris was in fact a planet larger than Pluto by about 27%. It was a beefy straggler indeed. This was only part of the problem, however. Pluto and Eris were not alone way out there past Neptune. In fact, nearly 50 other objects had been discovered since Pluto's inauguration into planethood, and though they were smaller than Pluto, they were substantial enough in size to have their own moons, in the same way Pluto has Charon. And then, of course, there was Ceres, an object discovered in the early 19th century which led to the discovery of the asteroid belt. Ceres just happened to be large enough to be noticed, so is it a planet too? At last, the General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union gathered for apparently the 26th time in 2006 to discuss the well-being of our fair solar system. Should other objects out there be considered planets too? And if so, which ones? If you include Ares and Ceres, that's 11 planets, and if you include a couple of the similarly sized objects such as Sedna and Quoar, that's 14. And let's not forget those other 50 floating rocks out past Neptune. That would bring our planet count to almost 60. So where would we draw the line then? Well, the GA of the IAU simplified the whole ordeal for us, thankfully. In doing so, Pluto got kicked out of the Cool Kids Club and was demoted to dwarf planet status along with Ceres, Eris, and the other smaller cousins of the solar system. This decision was an overall result of these astronomers redefining, one could almost argue they were defining for the first time, what it means to be a planet. So let's take a look at Pluto according to the official characteristics of a planet. Number 1, it has to orbit the sun. Well, Pluto has that covered, albeit at an awkward angle and ellipse. Number 2, the planet has to have become round due to the force of its own gravity. Okay, that's a check as well. Sorry, Haumea, you'll have to sit this one out. And last, number 3, it has to dominate its own planetary neighborhood. That's where we run into some difficulties. See, Pluto may have the biggest gravitational attraction in its orbit. I mean, look at all those moons it has hovering over it all the time. But in actuality, if we account for all the junk in the path we call Pluto's orbit, we'll find that it collectively makes for a ton of matter in the sky. And Pluto only makes up about 0.07 of that space junk. So really, Pluto's orbit is untidy at best, and that's why it's not a planet. Of course, there are worse examples than Pluto out there. In fact, of all the dwarf planets floating aimlessly beyond Neptune, Pluto is the best looking. That giant of a dwarf Eris? Well, here's Pluto's orbit with the solar system, and here's Eris's orbit. Yeah. Besides the ones I've mentioned, there are plenty of other trans-Neptunian objects worth noting. Sharing the Kuiper Belt with Pluto and Eris, we have Sedna, Haumea, Makemake, Quoar, Orcus, Veruda, Ixia, and, of course, 2000 OR10. But these aren't planets. They're just stunted cousins of the big boys, the real planets. And there's Pluto, the king of the dregs. So it's not a planet after all. Big deal. Its controversy is just one of the myriad of others that have been debunked by science. But hey, that doesn't mean all is lost for the little guy. Not at all. In short, Pluto may have the body of a dwarf, but the heart of a planet. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions you want me to answer, leave it in the comments of any of my videos. Also, if commenting is too convenient for you, I also have an email address strictly for YouTube business, captainmcmuffin@gmail.com. I'm Captain McMuffin, and I'll see you next time on Stuff You've Probably Wondered.